Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 5 to Thrive Live. I'm Karolyn Gazella, and I'm here with my co-host and good friend, Dr. Lise Alschuler, who is with me today. Hello, Lise. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Karolyn?
I am great.
Well, it's always a treat when we get to do this podcast together because we enjoy each other's company and we get to talk with each other, kind of like I imagine us sitting back and a couple of, maybe some Adirondack chairs, enjoying a sunset, having a great conversation in front of a bunch of people.
Exactly. That's what we're doing. No, I love our shows together. And I think this one is going to be a great one. I have to say, I saw you speak on this topic. It was a few years ago in front of a bunch of doctors, and you got a standing ovation. And I'm like, whoa, because it was that good. That's how good you did.
Oh boy, that was a setup. Okay, thanks a lot.
Exactly.
Actually, I am a really big fan of today's topic, which is nervous system regulation and how that helps to manage stress. And it's so important because, let's just call a spade a spade. I think there's been there have been times in world history that have been exceptionally stressful, big world wars, things like that. And we are living in a time right now which is really, really stressful.
Mhm.
And so it's stressful in kind of a constant, insidious, and then dramatic and insidious and cumulative way. So our nervous systems are a bit of a wreck. So this is a really critical topic. But you know what? Before we jump in, can you thank our sponsors?
Absolutely. I'd love to, beginning with Cetria, a patented form of glutathione, clinically proven to raise blood glutathione levels. Glutathione is the master antioxidant and the body's primary defense against free radicals. It also helps support respiratory health. For more information, visit cetriaglutathione.com. Also, Pro Thrivers Wellness Brain, a product specifically for thrivers that contains cognizin for memory, focus, and attention, as well as other brain-supporting nutrients and herbs. You can find Pro Thrivers Wellness Brain online at pureformulas.com. There's also Pro Thrivers Wellness Sleep, which combines higher dose melatonin and other sleep supporting natural ingredients specifically designed for thrivers. You can find Pro Thrivers Wellness Sleep also at pureformulas.com. And Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics. It's a best-selling probiotic for more than 30 years, and it contains 12 probiotic strains that are shelf stable, so no refrigeration is required because of a unique 3-year fermentation process. It's a very effective probiotic. Learn more at drohhiraprobiotics.com. Okay, Lise, what I'd like to do is start with the basics and then move into some practical strategies. So first, tell us what the nervous system does and how does that relate to effective stress management?
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting question. I think in some ways we can think of the nervous system as an interface between our bodies and the world outside. So, on one level, our nervous system warns us of danger. So, for example, the classic example is, we touch a hot stove and then we pull our hand away. That's our nervous system immediately reacting. Our nervous system is also about regulating our body so that we have a coherent and cohesive way of functioning. So our nervous system regulates our heart rate, it regulates our blood flow, it even, regulates the way in which our intestinal system contracts and digests. And the big sort of head honcho, if you will, of the nervous system is historically thought to be the brain. So the brain is part of the nervous system, and within the brain, we have a limbic system, which is where we regulate our emotions. We have a cortex where we think. We have centers of our brain that translate the stimulus of our world into understanding and into reaction. And I say, historically, because there's also another part of our nervous system, which is a nervous system that innervates and generates impulses that is in the heart area. And in fact, sometimes the heart related nerve function responds to things faster and more quickly than does the brain. So it's not just about the brain, but essentially our nervous system is this beautiful interface between our physical beings, our emotional beings, and the world around us.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's very, very important and very complex. So how does that relate to stress?
So stress, and we're talking about distress and chronic distress, when we encounter or find ourselves in a stressful situation, we respond to that stress in a variety of ways, and it starts primarily with a perception of stress. So we perceive something as stressful, and that's actually important because you might not get stressed out by a big dog running towards you, but somebody else who grew up around scary dogs might get stressed out. So that's a perception event. And that perception is something that happens in a part of our brain, which is a very old part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is essentially on alert all the time for dangers. And when there's a perceived danger, the amygdala fires up and it sends signals. There's two things that happen that cascade, one very quickly within seconds and the other within minutes. So within seconds, the amygdala activates our sympathetic nervous system, and through the spinal cord, our nerve endings release norepinephrine and epinephrine. These are fight or flight hormones. These are things which accelerate our heart rate, which activate our senses, which rev us up, basically. And then within minutes, kind of on the heels of that, we have an endocrine response. So this is where, through the amygdala activation, we trigger our hypothalamus, which in turn signals our pituitary. Those are still in the brain. And then that message travels all the way chemically to our adrenal glands, where the adrenal glands, which are sitting right on the top of our kidneys and our mid-back, secrete cortisol. And cortisol is often referred to as the stress hormone. When we're under chronic stress, our adrenal glands, because of that signaling, will elevate and sustain its production of cortisol. And when that happens over a long period of time, that cortisol level rises to a point where cells become a bit resistant to it, just like people have probably heard of insulin resistance, which is a pre-diabetic state. High levels of insulin over a long period of time, cells become resistant to the insulin, and the message doesn't get through that insulin normally does. Same thing with cortisol. So high levels of cortisol, the message doesn't get through. So instead of cortisol being a response to an acute stress, which normally causes us to react and then kind of calm down, it stays high, and the cells don't get that kind of regulatory effect, and we start to disintegrate, really, and we start to see dis-ease come into body. So under chronic stress, basically all chronic diseases, you can fill in the blank, can start or be accelerated. So stress is a very deleterious influence in the body.
Yeah, and it is amazing that the body has such a physical response inside the body. Like there's a lot of physical things and physical ramifications going on inside the body when we perceive stress and when it becomes chronic, right?
Absolutely. And, I think this is one of the maladies of chronic, of current life, because we are really out of sync in many ways, and we live such busy, productive, demanding lives that we are encountering the stress of our daily lives constantly and keeping our stress response system on activation mode. So we get essentially stuck in the on position in terms of our stress response. And that's really where we start to see things like trouble sleeping. Or we might have low energy during the day, so we get fatigued. We start to get blood sugar irregularities. We start to get more joint aches and pains, digestive issues, and even immune dysfunction. I mean, The list literally goes on and on. So stress is not something that we can just sort of push aside. I'll deal with it later, because it's starting to, as I say, unravel our health from the minute it starts to become a constant in our lives.
Yeah, can you be a little bit more specific about the health ramifications? I mean, like, for example, if a person is under chronic stress, could that lead to the development of cancer? Or so give us some specifics as to why it's so important to have a regulated nervous system.
So essentially, what happens is when we're under chronic stress, most people are in a state of what we call hypercortisolemia. So this cortisol level, which normally, in addition to being secreted in high amounts following an acute stressor, and then it comes back down to normal, when we're under chronic stress, it stays at sort of an elevate, it never comes back down all the way. And the other component to this is that there's a diurnal or a daily rhythm to cortisol, such that it's generally highest in the morning, and then it naturally comes down over the course of the day, and then it starts to creep back up as we sleep. So this is this nice wave-like pattern. And it turns out there are actually genes in our body, which are called clock genes, and those genes are turned on or off specifically in relationship to the amount of cortisol in this circadian pattern, or its counter hormone melatonin, which has a wave-like pattern as well, just the opposite of cortisol. And these clock genes function either turned on or off in response to melatonin or cortisol. So if we're under chronic stress and we don't get that wave-like pattern, and instead we invert it, or we have kind of a flattened high level, then it disrupts the function of our clock genes. And our clock genes are important for a lot of what I call housekeeping functions that are very important to our long-term health. So when our clock genes are not functioning well, then we don't do cell cleanup very well, which is a process called autophagy or senescence. We don't send damaged cells, like a precancerous cell, into the apoptotic pathway or the cell suicide pathway as well. The ability of our cells to generate an antioxidant response to an oxidant is diminished. And these are just some examples. So you can imagine over time, if these core functions are disrupted, then we leave ourselves vulnerable to the development of things like cancer, chronic immune deficiencies, chronic stress, and that high level or that disrupted pattern of cortisol can also disrupt the function of the smooth muscles in our body, because these are under not only the influence of cortisol, but I mentioned earlier that when we encounter stress, we also secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine, and those sympathetic hormones are very important in when we need them, but if they're at a high level, they can also disrupt a lot of core functions, contributing to things like heart arrhythmias, which is a smooth muscle issue, intestinal spasms, or irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, so there's, depending on which consequence of stress you look at, you can sort of trace it towards different disease states or dysregulated states.
Yeah, and almost every disease state has some type of link, or can have some type of link. So it's this is really important stuff. So let's move into the practical. How do you help your patients with regulation of their nervous system? Do you have go-to strategies that you like to recommend? I realize it's all individualized, and you take one patient at a time and you kind of tailor it towards their needs and their stress, et cetera, their lifestyle, et cetera. But what about some foundational strategies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go back and forth, because I know this is important to you and you have a lot of strategies and you are asking me all the questions, and that's not fair. So I'm
That's
going
okay.
to ask you some too.
That sounds
Um,
good.
so I will start by saying that I would say there's one thing that I almost universally recommend, and that is breathing. And I know we talk about this and it gets talked about a lot, but honestly, if you look at the physiology of what happens when we slow our rate of breath, and I have to give credit to Dr. Andrew Weil for popularizing what he calls the 4-7-8 breath, because I think this is one of the easiest and most effective ways to immediately help our nervous system to reset. So it's what the 4-7-8 breathing is about is taking a count of 4 to do an inhalation, and then you hold the inhalation for a count of 7, and then you exhale slowly over a count of 8. And just doing that 2 to 4 times is an amazing reset. So it's a really good practice for when you've just experienced something that's very stressful. Actually, I had this experience today, and then I just took a minute. I stepped out of the situation I was in, and I did 4-7-8 breaths, and I just regained my equilibrium, my equanimity enough to kind of re-engage with a less stressed feeling. And if we were to do just that, just the breathing, every time we just feel that stress upon us, the impact would be extraordinary over a period of time. So that's my favorite strategy. So what about you, Karolyn? What's your go-to?
Oh man, I've got lots, but I am going to give you one that is super unique, and I feel that it's really easy. Flowers and plants. Now, hear me out. Hear me out. I love fresh cut flowers. I love plants. I actually love your plants, Lise. You've inspired me because I have some new ones now that are really cool. But here's the
Nice.
thing about having flowers and plants in your home environment or your work environment. It actually they provide a physiological and a psychological effect. Research shows that they help reduce blood pressure. They reduce those cortisol levels that are staying elevated. Plants and flowers will actually help reduce those. They'll reduce anxiety. They have a positive effect on mood. Studies in the office show that they increase productivity. And there's more of an opportunity to be mindful. And I mean, even when I'm out in nature, I'm always looking at the trees and the plants and the flowers and the birds and everything else, which makes me more present and takes me out of that anxious monkey mind that we sometimes get into. So that's my unique one, flowers and plants.
I love it. I love it. I mean, and there's such a beautiful way in which plants are an example for us of how to confront the adversity of their environments and still grow and thrive, right? So, yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, plants and flowers are resilient, and they can teach
Mhm,
us to be more resilient. So,
mhm.
yeah, okay. So what's your next one?
So this one is probably a little off the beaten path for some, but I find prayer to be one of the most effective stress management strategies. And I'm not necessarily talking about religious prayer, although for some people that's what works for them. I'm talking about taking a moment and connecting with our higher self internally. And depending on one's belief system, for me, I then seek to connect to what I will call the divine or the greater collective unconscious, and to engage in a moment of gratitude, of humility, of seeking grace, and to adopt a feeling of being like in a sort of a supplicant. There's a pose that Mother Mary is often depicted in where she's standing and her head is slightly bowed and her hands are extended to her side with her palms facing forward. And it's like a picture of sort of supplication and acquiescence, but strength at the same time. And that's sort of the feeling that I have when I pray. And I find that it just resets my perspective, no matter what experience I'm in.
I love that. I have a question for you.
Mm.
Do you find that the timing of the day um, helps or enhances the prayer? Like, for example, I do my loving kindness prayer in the morning, and I like to start my day that way. And I actually don't pray at night. But is there timing? Is there a timing that can make prayer even more beneficial?
I mean, I think like any habit, it's good for people to develop a prayer habit. So, and I don't, that's a kind of fun pun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Prayer habit. But I don't mean it actually as clothing. But I do think that starting your day with prayer is beautiful, and I do that as well, and it very much helps me to frame myself for the day. But I
Mhm.
also find that when I, sometimes I forget, and I'm always sorry when I forget, because when I am in a situation that's challenging or that I feel overwhelmed by, because stress usually has a feeling of overwhelm with it. So when I'm in that feeling of overwhelm, if I can remember to pray, and it can be just very simple and very short, it can be a phrase that one repeats, whatever it is, to just, again, to connect to a greater sense of self and a greater place in this cosmos of things. I think when I have that ability to do it in the moment, then I always emerge on the other side feeling, I don't know, it's almost like I've taken a spiritual shower. Like I just feel a little bit refreshed and reset to deal
Oh,
with whatever I'm dealing with.
I love the spiritual shower. And I think you're right. It doesn't have to be in the morning, and it can be infused throughout your day. And I think, and that leads me to my next one.
Well, wait,
Um,
I have to ask you a
oh,
question because I haven't
okay.
had very many questions. Carolyn, what's your next one?
Okay. Well, my next one is a little bit different again, and it's a supplement. So I
Ooh.
have been actually struggling with anxiety, and based on what's going on in the world, and I've just noticed, and it's actually been going on for well over a year now, where my anxiety has been worse. And I used to take a supplement called L-theanine, or suntheanine is the brand that was in the studies, with magnesium at night to help me sleep. Well, I started because L-theanine does not, it has more of a balancing effect with alpha and beta waves, so it actually will increase focus as well as reduce feelings of anxiety. I started taking it in the morning with my coffee because caffeine will actually help the anti-anxiety effects of L-theanine. Um, and I also take it during the day. And I have noticed that, I mean, I've probably increased my dose by double on a daily basis. So I have noticed that that helps. And I think sometimes dietary supplements can be effective at being a supplement. So in addition to these other things that we're talking about, taking a dietary supplement can help sometimes take the edge off. And I'm a big fan of suntheanine.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and you're using it in a very appropriate way, and it's a really wonderful anxiolytic because of what you said. It increases clarity at the same time, which is a really great combination. Not sedating at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now what is your third strategy? Your third go-to strategy?
Well, I think that it's a bit of a toss-up for me. So I'm gonna cheat and say too fast.
Okay.
Um, so the first one is physical activity. There's nothing worse than being stressed and just sitting there and letting it all bottle up inside. So I think doing some, even if it's like some wall push-ups or a couple of deep squats, or, if you can, walking around, that is absolutely essential, I feel like, in the moment. And of course, a regular habit of daily physical activity is really important. Actually, I'm going to pause before I go into my second one because I bet you have some things to say about physical activity.
I do, because I would agree with you. I think that that is paramount when it comes to my mental health. If I am injured or can't get out and be active, then my mental health suffers. So the only thing I'm going to add to that, and I know you will agree with me 110%, is if we can be physically active out in nature and outdoors. I know, as your weather gets hotter and it's not always possible, but if you can, I find that the benefits of physical activity enhance my mental health when I'm doing it outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And even looking outside if it's too,
Hmm.
weather's bad out there. So my other thing, which is, this is definitely a departure, but I want to put a plug in for doing something that just feels really comfortable. And this is sometimes a habit that would be characterized, and I'm using air quotes, as a bad habit. But, maybe it's eating a comfort food, or I don't know what other bad habits there might be. Ordering takeout or sitting on the couch and just vegging in front of a TV. I don't really know, but I think that there's there is something to be said for doing something that feels comfortable, even if it might not be super uber healthy, as long as it's not overly harmful to you if you repeat it often. And the reason I say this is because when we get into that comfortable place, usually it's something comfortable because it's something that we've developed from early in our life. And so it's very familiar to us. So it's like cozy. It's like getting into a cozy, pair of sweats and just, snuggling in. And I think it's important to get our nervous system to a place of feeling secure and safe, and so that we can start to disentangle ourselves from the stress of the moment. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I love it. I love it for a lot of reasons. And I did a show the other day about diet and how, we shouldn't be so restrictive, and we should indulge, and we should have, our meal be something that's enjoyable. And, I think that that's really important. And obviously we want to do that within reason. We don't want to, engage in unhealthy behaviors just because we feel good, so I think that there's balance there, like with everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. And what about you? Any
Okay.
last strategy
Yep.
in 30 seconds?
Yes, before you thank our sponsors, I'm going to say creativity. And I don't have any science associated with creativity, tapping into your creativity as it relates to stress specifically, but I read some research showing that it helps with longevity, healthy aging. Being more creative and tapping into your creativity as you age will help you age in a more healthy way. So yeah, I like
Mm,
creativity.
wonderful. That's a great one to end on. Well, we do very much appreciate our sponsors. First, ProThrivers Wellness Sleep and Brain Formulas. Also, Cetria glutathione, the superior glutathione to support liver and immune health, and Dr. Ohhira's award-winning shelf-stable probiotic. And just a reminder that you can find all of our past shows at ithriveplan.com or on any of your favorite podcast outlets.
Absolutely. We're on well over 100 podcast outlets. So we're out there. Just search for 5 to Thrive Live. So thanks again to our sponsors. Thanks for listening. And thanks again, Lise, for a great show.
And thank you, Karolyn, for just being you and being in the world and being in my life. Love it.
I know. It's been a 25-year journey with the two of us, and it's been wonderful every step of the way. So, all right, everybody, have a great night. May you experience joy, laughter, and love. It's time to thrive.
That's